Meeting to order and ask for a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting by Evelyn, seconded by John. Any questions, changes, any additions? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, so moved. And I think we're turning it over to Frank. Jeff said he'd be a few minutes late, so we can, I think we're going to go to the number 2,
Rachel?
or number 3,
Number 3.
number 3, which is on page 3. Frank, if you can go over that with us.
Sure. We had an emergency repair on our server room in the HSB building. The air conditioning, we had a leak in the compressor, so we had to set up temporary cooling in there, and I called in Siemens for the emergency repair. They had to actually do some internal welding and repair the unit. I normally would have quoted this. We don't have a service agreement for that building, so I would have gotten 3 prices. However, because of the nature of the room and the fact that it was an emergency, I called Siemens. It's their control unit. We weren't exactly sure what was going on over there, so that's the reason that I didn't go with a local company or quote it, but they did do the work. It's all repaired, and then further down, I'm going to have a recommendation for some backup in that room. So.
Okay, any questions for Frank on this issue? Go ahead.
I'll move it.
Ron, put it on the floor. You have a second?
Second.
By John. Any other questions? Rachel?
I'm sorry, can you just briefly explain to me the maintenance agreement then that we have with Siemens? So it doesn't cover repair if the equipment breaks?
It doesn't cover the new building, the HSB building. It covers this building. The equipment in this building is actually owned by Siemens for 15 years. The term of the agreement that we have with them. When we started this agreement, they replaced all of the equipment in this building.
Okay.
They maintain it. If anything breaks, they pay for fixing it. We don't have that agreement in the new building, so anything that happens over there, I have to get it repaired on our own.
That's still not under warranty?
No, there's a 3-year warranty on it.
So I take it we own all of that equipment over there then?
And you could do maintenance agreements, correct, but they're expensive. I know we
did. We actually brought an agreement with Siemens to the board a couple years ago, and they decided at that time not to go with a maintenance agreement at that building. So, one not really problem, but it is Siemens controls in that building, which we specified when we built the building. So any repair that has to be done to the actual control computer system, they have to do it because it's proprietary. But the machinery itself, we can quote it and have it fixed.
Okay. Any other questions from any supervisor? Ron?
Yeah, I just wanted to, this page here shows the nature of the work.
Yes.
So they, just for the record, they replaced the injection valve.
Yes.
And repaired a leak on the discharge line. What does it mean, pull the vacuuming unit? They had to pull the vacuuming unit to do that repair? I see. Thank you.
Any other questions? Travis?
I just wanted, I mentioned it's the...
Travis, could you come to the podium, please?
Thank you. Hi, Travis White at Queensbury. I mentioned this to Frank ahead of time, and I don't really see it as a problem, but I just wanted to mention, to make it complete, that I did check around $136 an hour for an air conditioning mechanic is about 50% more than a local air conditioning mechanic. Recall I talked to LaPans and others, and I just want to note, but Frank also said that if this wasn't an emergency situation, he would be looking at sources like that. But, this is a substantial increase over going rate. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved. And Frank, I think is that all you had?
Unless you wanna, if you wanna jump to number 2 under referrals, we can talk about the HVAC in that same room.
Yeah, why don't we do that, that'll,
I priced a backup unit, a permanently mounted backup unit for that room, similar to what we have in the IT server room in this building. And we would actually need 2 split units. The difficulty over there is the IT server room is right in the center of the building, and we would have to exhaust it to the roof to get into a coil. So what I would recommend is that we purchase another portable unit. We have one, the unit we have is a 3-ton unit, and that kept the room over there at about 83 degrees. If it gets to 90, they get nervous. But we were able to maintain, and that was pretty hot weather. So with 2 of those units, we would have 6 tons of cooling, and the permanent unit that's in the room now is a 5-ton, so we should be more than adequate for backup. And the nice thing about those units is we can use them elsewhere in the county if we need them. We've used them in the courts before. So my thought would be to set one of them up kind of on a permanent basis in that room, so they could just flip a switch and turn it on if something happened, and then that would give us a little time to get the other unit over there and up and operating. You can buy these portable units for about $600 at Home Depot, and that's what we have over there now, is that same unit.
so you want to get 2 of those?
We have one. I'd like to get another one.
Another one?
It's like I said, one kept us at 83 degrees, 2 would have been better. It would have been better if we could have gotten down below 80.
Okay.
And I would propose, I have money in my budget, as long as we don't have any major breakdowns later on in the year. I may be coming back to ask you, but for now, I can pay for it out of my budget. And
Okay. Ron?
Yeah, I'll move it, and then I have a question.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second? Evelyn has a second, and Ron?
Now, the portable units, how do they ventilate?
You ventilate by a hose, which we found actually an outlet in the room, so we can go down a floor into the ceiling space, so it's not affecting any of the other rooms. And then they have a catch tray, just like a dehumidifier would, that we dump, and they'll last a shift. So we can have the night crew dump it, and we dump it, and it's more than adequate. We don't fill them with water. And they're designed so that the water isn't going back into the air, so it's not a question, it's not an issue with the equipment or computers. They're a pretty good unit, actually.
And just, Chairman McFarland, and this would be this type of unit and situation would be for emergency backup situations only?
Right.
So this wouldn't be a day-to-day?
No, this would be strictly backup in that server room and elsewhere. Like I said, we've used them in the courts for extra.
John, you had a question?
Yeah, so, okay, you kept referring to that room, then you said server room.
It's
Okay,
the IT
that
server
answered my
room.
question, because those servers have to stay, they can't overheat.
Right.
Then we're talking real expensive.
Right. We have
Okay.
alarms in that room.
Yeah,
That's why I would suggest that we leave one of them kind of on a permanent basis.
yeah.
They
see
don't
that.
take up a lot of room, and then that would, if we had an emergency, that would keep us until we got the other one set up.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone? Hearing none, call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. And that takes care of what you have, Frank?
Yes.
Okay, back to the agenda, and we're at section 4, number 1, RFP Solar, Jeffrey.
Okay, we've, as I think I indicated last month, we were conducting interviews. We conducted some, additional interviews approximately a month ago, and then had follow-up questions which have been submitted to the proposing firms for the solar RFP. We're still waiting on responses on some of those, and the details are really getting into some of the issues surrounding the flood zone and how the firms are handling the flood zones, and then particular details on repair and maintenance that they would provide during the contract terms. So we're awaiting those responses, currently, and then I anticipate the, working group meeting again, here in the coming weeks. And I think we are getting close to having our questions answered and being ready for a recommendation, but we're not there yet. I do wanna just review the process that we've been underway with, so that everybody understands and we can address any concerns any, board members or committee members have. We had established a working group, who's been working on these proposals. It includes myself and Kevin Hajos, he's another professional engineer. We had, brought in Clark Patterson's, solar expert, his name's Dave Hart. He's worked on many projects like this, and he's really our technical source to get into the details of these, power purchase agreements, in the level of detail that a civil engineer can't get into on these type of proposals. So he's been our technical resource to really clarify, to identify differences in the proposals, and then also to help us generate the relevant questions back to these solar firms, you know, so that we can get really an apples to apples comparison with each of the proposals. We've also on the working group had, Chairman Gerard, Supervisor, Stroud. We've had a rep from Town of Warrensburg. It's been Tom Belden, he's the water superintendent. As you know, Town of Warrensburg has facilities on this site, and they will be a stakeholder as part of that power purchase agreement, that we're working towards. We've also had, Dee Park at the meetings, and she's been informed, as the Director of Countryside, and we've had Dr. Seeley involved. And that really brings all of the key stakeholders, whether it's Countryside, Town of Warrensburg, Cornell, certainly 2 representatives from this committee, and the county engineers, as well as the county contracted consultant, Clark Patterson Lee. It's been a very deliberate process. We're looking at this long-term. This will likely be a 20-year contract. So, taking this time here in a matter of months to get through, and clarify these proposals and really understand the details of the proposals, and more importantly, how the comparisons are, and the contrasting comparisons between these proposals, because as you know, and as we said from the beginning, the devil is in really the assumptions being made by these firms and how they are projecting future utility costs, how they are projecting other increases. And so we need to get into the details of those assumptions and make sure that we're comparing them in an equivalent basis to understand, whether a firm is, you know, over projecting, you know, if they over project increases in utility costs, they will also over project, potential savings. So that's where we've forced the firms to really get on the same page as far as the assumptions they're making and identifying those assumptions so that we understand the differences. That's been an ongoing process. You know, I did get some questions early on in the process. We have, the firms have indicated that their proposals, at least in part, are business confidential. What that means is the county is obligated to maintain that confidentiality for these businesses, because what they consider proprietary can't be disclosed and to the public at this point, and it certainly can't be disclosed to their competitors. I had been requested, Supervisor Westcott, Supervisor Beatty requested unredacted forms of the RFPs. Those were provided November 25th of 2014. That is available to any other supervisor as well. I haven't received any comments or questions specific to the proposals other than what's occurring in the working group team, or the general questions that have occurred here regarding when are we going to have all the information to vote on. And as I've said repeatedly, the information will have to be, you know, fully disclosed to everybody here. It'll have to be an executive session, because much of it will be business confidential and proprietary. So we're waiting to a point where we're confident that we have all of the information. Otherwise, we'd be spending an hour in executive, you know, every month generating these questions that the working group has been doing. I did receive some questions from Supervisor Seaver last week. She asked for the unredacted RFPs. Those have been provided. I think, have you picked those up? and she's followed up with some questions over the weekend. I did receive, a list of questions from Supervisor Westcott on Friday. I responded to those immediately, I think 3 of the 5 questions on Friday, and then the other 2 responses will come later today. I'm happy to disclose all of this information to any elected officials. You can have everything we have with the understanding that it's business confidential. Or you can be patient, let the working group really decipher this and come up with a complete analysis and an apples-to-apples comparison. That's really what we've been working towards, so that then we can lay it all out for everyone in an understandable form, when we get there. But certainly, if any elected officials want the analysis, want the key proposals, want any of the information, the questions and answers that have been provided by the solar firms, that is available for elected officials unredacted. We've had some FOIL requests from individual citizens, and frankly, we have to go through a process of redacting much of the information out of them, probably to the point where they're not really that useful, but that is our obligation because of this business confidential standpoint. I anticipate having, as I said, those questions, we should have them soon. They might generate more questions, in which case we'll continue to ask those questions and get the answers. And again, we've been at this for a while now, since last fall. It has a life of its own as far as the questions that have been asked, the answers provided, and the additional questions that pop up as a result of more discussions. But this is going to be likely a 20-year contract. So are we going slow and methodical? Yes. Are we using a very deliberate method? Yes. Do we have the right experts involved? I believe so. But this is a long-term process, a long-term contract that we're trying to get to a position where this committee and the Board of Supervisors can make a well-informed decision. And we're not to that point yet.
Any questions from supervisors? Rachel?
One, I'd just like to make a comment. Jeff, I certainly appreciate the quick responses. I have had some questions over the last week or so, and you have made every effort within a very short time frame, not only to answer my questions, but to provide me with information that I just can't read fast enough to be as quick as you've given it to me. So I appreciate that. I guess my question would be, at an appropriate time, whether it be an executive session or whenever, will we have an opportunity to speak directly with the working group? I certainly respect both John Stroud and Dan Gerard as our supervisor representatives in the working group, but I'm wondering, at the appropriate time, will we hear a report or a presentation where I could ask some more pointed questions directly to this working group that has a good understanding?
My intent would be once the working group has consensus, and I'm just one member. I'm kind of the technical, trying to coordinate the technical effort here, but we have those 4 stakeholders involved. I think once the working group is comfortable with proceeding, I would invite the working group to this committee meeting too, and I think they would. I think they're expecting to be part of that discussion, and frankly, I would like that to happen so that the committee members can understand the people involved, including Dr. Seeley and Dee Park and Town of Warrensburg representatives, and our engineers, myself and Kevin and Clark Patterson, all have been fully informed through this and working this process. And yes, I would like them here. That is certainly my intent when we get to a point where a final decision is being made. Or a decision can be deferred. If there's more questions coming out of that first, executive session to lay this all out, the committee's not comfortable, again, this is a 20-year contract. If the committee's not comfortable moving ahead, if supervisors want more information or want us to do more homework, I'm fine with that.
And I appreciate that. I think I've told you over the weekend, I do have concerns, but a lot of that is a lot of homework that needs to be done and questions that need to be asked. And one of the questions that I had, and maybe Dan, you can address this, is we just went through having to deal with the Siemens contract with Westmount. What if we sell a property down the road, and how does that transfer if we go into this contract with the solar you know, what does that mean, and how does it get transferred, and are we gonna have problems with that? Because during the time of the Westmount sale, I had several supervisors talk to me about, a sale of other properties. So that was something that, occurred to me in terms of just is that gonna be part of that contract?
And I think there's been several, issues through this, and that's an interesting point. I guess my opinion is Countryside and the property up there, certainly a similar situation could come up, and I guess is that what you're alluding to,
Right.
in the Cornell building, et cetera. Those are things that certainly Martin should address with us as we move forward. And I would express frustration myself, because individualistically, because I'm on the Cornell Cooperative Board, the intent was to get them help because they're fully electric up there, and it doesn't work. And it's extravagant bills. For a 6-month period, they pay, I believe, $9,700 in utilities to heat that. And it's not functional or efficient, and we've started this process, over 2 years ago. And, as we've moved forward, there's moving targets that exist to try to pin them down, and much of it is because NYSERDA is involved, certain grants or abilities to make it more feasible to do it. Some of those have life cycles. And anyways, as we've proceeded, and I understand the investment that we're making with our 2 engineers who are reviewing and the Clark Patterson engineer, and trying to satisfy Dr. Sealy and Warrensburg Town and Countryside. Having all those players involved for immediate success, we're also looking to the future. So when we're done with the data collection and we execute a plan that has been vetted with all the supervisors, with our attorney, our administrators, et cetera, and we finally add up all the dots and connect them and then execute something, that we won't be able to just stop here. We're going to proceed with other places. Now, John already brought up at a meeting that Ciba-Geigy would be a perfect spot for a farm, possibly. And then, of course, that initiates questions about contamination and structural issues, and then they talked about ballast, where you wouldn't have to disturb that. But these are interesting discussions which should pay dividends later on, because we're doing it the proper way and getting all the information, and then seeking a level playing field to move forward with each and every interested company that has come before us. And I think it's been the proper way to do it. I don't think it's been the most expeditious or efficient for Cornell Cooperative, because I think I see Fred Monroe, I see John Straw, who have executed this for their communities. Matt Simpson's done it, and you know, it's one and done. And we are doing what we're supposed to, because we continually get accused of not getting into something where we're going to make a cogen mistake or a trash plant mistake. So this is why we have an engineer from Clark Patterson. This is why we have our engineers refereeing the process. It's why we have 2 supervisors on there, 1 doctor from Cornell, a member from Warrensburg and Countryside, all involved, that we have floodplain issues and insurance issues. We have septic issues that we can't locate, or we don't know if we can locate. We have roofs that we can put on, but we don't know if they'll give the optimum efficiency. So all these have come out in the process, and I think we're doing the right thing. I don't think anyone's in a hurry to make a mistake, but we're certainly trying to do the right thing. And I have checked, and all the emails have come from Jeff to me that other supervisors have requested information for. I have not seen one instance where he hasn't responded in a timely manner and given them what he thought was needed. So that's where we're at. Does anyone have anything to add? Bud?
Just a comment. I'm very comfortable with the process that you guys are following. I don't think it would be a good idea to throw the technical information out to 20 supervisors who are not technical. That's why we hired these companies, that's why we hired the engineers that we have. The only concern I would have is that, you know, we put the solar farm in, and within a couple of years we get into the conversation, hey, do we want to get out of the business at Countryside? But we've made that decision, and the board wants to stay there, so, you know, with that proviso, I think you're going down the right route, I think you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
I think, Supervisor Seaver brings up a good question regarding that, transferability of that agreement, whatever the final form is. And I think that's pretty common because, keep in mind that even, private residents, you know, enter into these 20-year power purchase agreements. They're certainly not locked into owning their home for 20 years. So you know, we'll definitely make sure that those provisions are in there. I think that's pretty common. I don't think that's an issue. In fact, it would, if there's an annual savings derived out of these, this installation, it would enhance the marketability of the property because the new owner would be obligated to take over those same, the remaining, years of that agreement, and then they would derive, obviously, the savings. Or maybe there's other arrangements. Maybe we keep it there as part of an agreement with the new owner that, yeah, we're gonna still derive, credits off of that system, and it's completely independent, and, you know, they get, you know, a certain fee, or they incorporate it into their, purchase offer. But I'm pretty certain that that can be arranged. I appreciate it coming up because we'll make sure that that's part of the final contract as it goes forward. And so that the board has flexibility regarding, you know, ownership of the Cornell building, ownership of Countryside, and then certainly, you know, it complicates things a little bit with the town of Warrensburg being there. Certainly the county, if we sold any of the parcels there, we'd have to make sure town of Warrensburg, well systems aren't impacted, so. But I'm certain we can work that out because I think it's a common practice to have them transferable.
Any other questions from the supervisor? Hearing none, Travis?
Travis White, Queensberry. I mean, you're right, there are a lot of technical issues here, but I'm not gonna address any of them. I have concerns with a lot of them. I'm in the dark on most of them because I've been asking for information and that's been denied me. But I do have enough information here to make some statements, and these are not technical statements. Everybody in this room can understand what I'm about to say. And I'm getting all this information based on a quote from U.S. Clean Energy, LLC, which evidently is one of the companies that has not asked for their material to be kept confidential because it was given to me, and it was the only one that was given to me. So based on these numbers, the point is we are looking, in this case, they're looking at a 200 kilowatt system at Countryside, and all the numbers are based on this. And they're projecting, in today's dollars, a savings over 20 years of anywhere from $114,000 to $185,000. Now, those would be savings. But what you have to look at is that when Solar City or any of these companies that might get it go ahead and give this to you, they are going to be sending bills to the Internal Revenue Service, to NYSERDA, and they're going to be collecting money. Now, on this 200 kilowatt system that the county will save anywhere between $114,000 and $185,000, the IRS is going to have to pay out on their 30% match anywhere between $240,000 and $360,000, so that we can save $114,000 to $185,000. On top of that, NYSERDA is going to pay out $100,000 to $160,000. So other organizations that are taking taxes out of my pocket are going to be paying anywhere between $340,000 and $520,000, so that the county can save between $114,000 and $185,000. Any supervisor, any representative of me that would think that is a good idea, I would have words with, that taking money out of my pocket in other ways in order to save money on your budget is not something I'm asking you to do, particularly when you're making assumptions over a 20-year period. I told you I wouldn't get into the details of the technical details. I have considerable concerns about the way those estimates are being handled as far as savings. I think they're much higher than they are. I also take a special exception with Jeff when he says the devil's in the details. We're asking these companies to make all these assumptions on the savings. You should not be asking these companies to make any assumptions. You should be asking Clark Patterson. This is, you are, you know, if you go ahead and the only thing you're buying from this company is how much are you gonna sell this, power to me over 20 years? And are you a good company? You know, do we have all our bases covered on floodplain, everything? Those are all good questions. But to ask them to say, how much money are you gonna save me? You're asking the wrong people. You should be asking Clark Patterson. They should put their stamp on it. And they should say that, yeah, we think you're gonna save between $114,000 and $180,000 over a 20-year period. And then when that turns out not to be the truth, you can go back to CPL and say, why was this a problem? Otherwise, you're gonna be saying, well, it's US Clean Energy or it's Solar City that made these outrageous assumptions, which is not the case, because the emails that I got the other day, all the assumptions are coming from the county. They're saying, use 11 cents a kilowatt hour, forget about the demand portion of it. There's all kinds of technical things that are gonna affect the savings. And it's the county and CPL that are directing these assumptions. And they're the ones that ought to stand up for it. But the main thing I wanted to say, just to repeat, you should not be looking at getting, spending $520,000 to get less than $200,000 in return.
Travis, just a question for
Yes.
you.
Mm-hmm.
So you would be against any solar, anything the county gets into as far as solar?
I would be against any representative of mine making a decision to spend $3 of my taxes here so I could save $1 in your budget.
But my question was, does Warren County get involved in the solar? You're totally against it with the information.
If they didn't have to spend $3 to save $1, then I'd be totally for it. But you can't ever tell me that. That'll never happen. In Siemens, with Westmount, told us that we would never save a penny there unless Medicaid put in the money. We should have stopped it there, and we should stop it here. You don't need to get into the technical details. You need to say, should I ask the people that I represent to pay $3 to get $1 savings out of my budget? And I think the answer should be no.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? We have Mr. McDevitt. I think I saw your...
Can you just state the IRS amount and the NYSERDA amounts?
Yes. So on the IRS will pay 30% of the stated cost. Now, the IRS is in litigation with your number one vendor here, Solar City. Solar City has been telling them it's $6 a watt for most of their projects. And the IRS has been saying, it seems like everyone else says it's $4 a watt. But anyhow, I told you 200 kilowatts times just say the $4 a watt would be, you know, 800,000, 30% of $800,000. Yeah. Or if it's $6 a watt and we don't know what they're going to tell them, actually we should, because I asked that in the when the RFP was put out, we had asked these people to tell us, what are you going to ask the IRS? What are you going to state as your cost? Just so we could answer a question like you just asked now, because I think it's an important question. And so that is it. And then on the NYSERDA, my understanding is Pond 4 is anywhere from 50 cents to 80 cents a watt on top of that, times 200,000. 50 cents, yeah, to 80 cents a watt. Thank you.
Peter?
Just an observation, Danny. If we took an investment tax credit away from, which is generated by the federal government, which goes to a homeowner, if they choose to, a homeowner that's paying taxes, if we took that away, if we took away the NYSERDA contribution, if we took away the ability to depreciate those solar panels on our roof, there would not be a solar industry in this country. So those are big-time issues that Travis is bringing up, and they're issues that are generated to motivate consumers to wean us off coal, to wean us off oil, and go to renewables, and to reduce the cost of energy for a consumer. So again, those are big-time national issues that I think you're bringing up, Travis. And for us to attempt to deal with that at this level, I think one could argue that a greater good is being served by encouraging people to go to solar, to wean us off the things that most scientists would argue may very well be destroying our planet ultimately, and actually there's a greater good being served here. So the NYSERDA, the investment tax credit, these are big time issues that I don't know how a board of supervisors in Warren County can deal with it. I think there's a greater good and a motivation to do that.
Anyone else? Rachel?
Chairman, I hesitate even bringing this up, but I'm hoping you're gonna address it when you report back to the committee in that, executive or wherever. But I guess I'm wondering what the basis is or the credibility of the investigations that I've read about online that are occurring, whether it be through the Department of Justice or the Department of Treasury. I'd like to know before we look at entering an agreement as a county for 20 years, has that been vetted? What's the recommendation going into this agreement, knowing that there's some federal investigations there? That is a concern. So I'm assuming you're gonna address that when you come back and give your final recommendation. I just wanna make sure that the company is asked about it, or we have more information regarding those investigations.
We have not investigated into the ongoing investigations or litigation or anything else. I can certainly try and derive what information I can. I don't know if we will have access to all the details, and I think the working group can certainly get the opinion of the firms involved on what they see as the issue and where it's heading. So I'll certainly try and get some more information on that. I don't know how effective I'll be, but I'll see what we can find out.
Jim?
Yeah, John Stroud, you've been through this before, right, with the solar. Did you have the same assumptions with the IRS and NYSERDA that Travis was talking about, or do you have any insight into that?
Well, the IRS and NYSERDA have an X amount of fixed dollars that they were gonna provide us incentives, they call them blocks. And they're gonna go until they're used up. Now, if Warren County doesn't take advantage of it, Essex County probably will, Washington County probably will. The other counties will probably lower their energy costs for their citizens, whereas we take the option because, well, we're gonna take the argument that, well, the IRS and the NYSERDA is also taxpayer money, so we shouldn't take it. Okay, well then Essex County, Washington County, all the other counties that took advantage of it and lowered their tax rates for their individual citizens are gonna be laughing all the way to the bank. These monies are available. I had nothing to do with it, but like Supervisor McDivitt points out, there's some good reasoning behind it, is to try and avoid some of the pollution and some of the other things that the only way you're gonna do that is provide these kind of incentives to go to these sustainable alternative energy forms. I know at Queensbury, we save money. We used it as part of our efficiency plan. We are saving money for the Queensbury town taxpayers.
Is it similar to what's been?
It's not a cut and dry thing. You have metering, you have remote net metering, you have remote metering, you have different configurations. You have companies that offer you a particular price, a PPA, a power purchase agreement at a particular watt per watt basis. Then they have escalation clauses. And then you have something, you have to look at each company. Is this a brand new company started up by one individual from another state who's never had any experience with New York State? I mean, that might be the case, and I think we have one similar to that. Or do you want to go with somebody that has a strong running background? Do they have a maintenance group? And if the system goes wrong, it's their responsibility, it's their liability. But is this company well established enough to provide us confidence that they can do this over a 20-year period. Some companies we interview may not have that, and others maybe more so. It's, and to complicate that, you have a flood zone. You have 3 separate entities. Can they be consolidated and treated as one, or is it more effective to break up the solar field that's present? And can that be treated as a remote net metering or a net metering? I mean, this group is doing their due diligence. It's a careful, methodical process, not to make a mistake, and they're being very careful about it. I want to give them credit for that. But there's no easy answer, and it takes a lot of homework.
Well, that's why you have some experience.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you-
Well, mine is relatively recent. Mine was a rooftop experience. I negotiated a contract with them where I will pay them 75% of my going rate. See, I caught them in a bill, they were going New York State's going rate. I said, no, the contract I worked out with you is my going rate, which I work out with a separate company, Integris. You know, so if I'm paying 7.8 cents on a 3-year contract with Integris, then I pay Monolith 75% of that. But then there's delivery fees and other things that come into play. See, it's so, so if you're asking a group to go very carefully and very methodically, I think you've got the right group working here.
I'm not,
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, there's no simple answer to the solution. But again, if you're gonna say, well, you know, my taxpayer, I'm an ARS taxpayer, I'm a NYSERDA taxpayer, and they're providing these incentives and everybody else is gonna take advantage of it, and you're not, well, who's the fool?
Okay, all right. Doug?
Thanks, Dan. I think we're going at a decent pace here, but I get a little concerned, I follow up with Rachel, when Jeff doesn't even know that there's litigation right now with Solar City, which happens to be, I think, our leading candidate. That concerns me. I mean, if the committee doesn't even know that, and I'm sure they're doing their due diligence, but on the other hand, if they don't even know that, what are we missing? I don't want to get into a contract with a company that has some significant legal issues pending. So that's a very big concern on my part. You know, I can see us doing something, then down the road, boom, oh, Solar City is going to go out of business or whatever because of this or that. I don't know. But I'm just saying that's a big concern on my part. I hear what Travis says, and I agree with a lot of it. I also hear what Mr. McDivitt says, and I agree with that too. So obviously, there's a lot of issues here. Spending $3 of tax money to save $1 for us, that's an issue. On the other hand, I believe in renewable resources and energy, so I'm torn there. But I just want to make sure, and I'm not questioning who's on the committee, but I am concerned that when we're down to 2 players, and one of them has significant issues, and we don't even know about that, that concerns me. So, thanks.
Thanks, Doug. Travis, I want to get the supervisor. Travis, you want to go? And I try to sum this up. I mean, I like the debate, and I think we're covering a lot of territory, but...
Yeah, I'll make it quick. As far as Solar City is concerned, we're talking about, going for a 20-year contract. They haven't even been around 20 years. They're losing money. They're losing money. And this 30% break, which is keeping them in business, is scheduled to go down to 10% in 2 years, I think it is. So there are a lot of things, there are a lot of stresses on this company. So if all of a sudden, we have this thing and we have an agreement, we think it's going to, do us some good, it's not even a guarantee. With Siemens, we had a guarantee that we wouldn't be losing money. We're losing money. We don't even have a guarantee on this, and we don't have any, and there's a good reason to believe they may not be around in 5 years. I mean, a lot of things can happen.
Okay,
Thank you.
Peter?
I just think we've got to be careful with litigation and it sounds like we're slamming Solar City here a little bit. no one really knows what they're talking about. So maybe Martin can give us a, you know, kind of a short opinion on it. When you're involved nationally, and you're utilizing appropriate, legal tax credits, we're probably talking about significant dollars on a national scale. So I just, I know Solar City did a municipality down in Albany, they did Niskayuna, I think, working very well, but I just, let's give Solar City a little bit of a break. They're in litigation, a lot of people are in litigation.
Evelyn?
I think we're kind of drifting here now into the realm of hypothesis rather than what we actually know. I think we should let the working group focus on what the working group is doing. We don't know that it's gonna be Solar City. The working group may throw them out entirely before they come back. We don't necessarily know what's going to happen there. I didn't hear Jeff say that he didn't know of the litigation. I just heard that he didn't know how much he could get for information. Certainly that's gonna be looked into. I would say let the working group do its job and come back to us, and then let's see where we are. We could debate this all day, and we honestly don't know, any of us here, really what we're talking about. I would just as soon we let the working group get to it and move on with the agenda.
Rachel?
If I may just clarify briefly, very briefly, my intent in asking those two questions was not to slam any organization or agency that we're looking at. It is simply to ask questions to be conveyed to the working group. I've done it privately with Jeff. A couple other questions came up this morning after reading some information, and I don't think there is anything unreasonable about asking a working group who's is established. I think we've heard that we don't want to make mistakes we've made in the past. So we're working very hard to make sure, as John said, to do the due diligence. All I'm asking is that two questions be addressed. One being their response to any of the potential litigation that is going on. I think that's a fair question without slamming any organization. And I also think that there has been discussions about selling Countryside. Is that something we need to remove? Is it something that's transferable? I haven't voted on that issue. Being at the board, I know Bud Taylor said the board's decided to go ahead and stay with Countryside. In the discussions around Westmont, I heard that brought back up, and I wanted to have that addressed as well. So I didn't hear you say you didn't know about litigation. What I heard you say is that you would inquire on that piece as well as the other piece regarding Countryside and come back with an answer. I appreciate the opportunity to ask those questions.
Okay. All right, can we move on to the courts, I believe is next.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I do see Judge Krogman here, so I guess I'll give him, if he has anything to state, or...
No, not really. I just wanted, by the presence, to answer any questions and certainly show our continued interest in the partnership that we've developed.
Okay. We have had some continued discussions via Judge Krogman and Paul Dusick with OCA regarding the process moving forward. Our understanding at this point is that OCA is 100% on board with the concept plan as presented. Their facilities review board normally meets when they have multiple projects because it's a little bit of an administrative burden for them. But the indication we've gotten from OCA is your county, go ahead and proceed with your plan. When they get some future projects, when some other counties catch up to where we're at, then they will hold a formal meeting to give us the formal review of the facilities review board. What we're starting now is really the discussions regarding our temporary measures, because we know the new judge and their staff will be here in January. So that is again ongoing coordination with OCA and what their process is, how involved are they in approving or reviewing our temporary measures plan, and those discussions are ongoing. Clark Patterson is proceeding with their design development to generate formal design and bid packages. We'll be reporting back to committee on any major decisions or any major options as we go forward, whether it be the layout of the ring road or the type of heating systems, the type of electrical, do we have a generator or not that will control the whole new wing. So there's a lot of those bigger decisions that we'll be reporting back to the committee on kind of our recommendations regarding those or seeking input as appropriate.
Judge, I think locally, we're doing a pretty effective job working with all the parties, and we've been doing pretty good, and Paul has stepped in, with a contact he has down, OCA, and, I think we're gonna possibly have some more movement on the temporary situation today, with their, getting, them a better understanding of where we're at and how we're proceeding. I think financially, the bonding issues and the legalities there, we've reviewed that and done a good job with that. Does anyone have any questions about how we're moving forward, or?
Dan, if I could just, I'm assuming the committee knows that, for the temporary solution, we're looking at the Supreme Court library area, correct? That's what we're targeting?
We have mentioned that, but because everything's predicated by the approval of OCA, we don't wanna step on our tongue.
No.
But locally, through the efforts of Judge Krogman and his staff, we think we've mapped out a very good plan for a temporary situation and moving the law library, et cetera.
I don't wanna let any cat out of the bag, but I think, that's the logical location, we all agree on that. Clark Patterson, has done some very rough plans, and we're really looking for the direction from OCA as to the specific plans and the level of those plans, for that temporary solution. But it's the logical place, it's not ideal, but it is the logical place for the new family court judge, and we have 7 months to complete whatever the project is, for that new judge.
Jeff?
I think once we get some, clarification from OCA on our process and how involved they're gonna be, and we have that initial discussion, we'll be back to committee with, kind of that concept plan. Just generally, the guiding principles we have on these temporary measures is to do it as cost effectively as possible. We certainly don't wanna incur, a lot of additional construction expense or, temporary measures, temporary building expense or rental expense or anything else. Our goal is to do it as cheaply as possible, but meet the needs of, that family court and the court staff. They have been very flexible, and generally, they know that it's not gonna be a comfortable situation for them in that interim period. But because we have, the county is moving forward with that permanent, expansion, at least they have a light at the end of the tunnel where they're willing to take some pain and really operate under less than optimal conditions for that period of time until the final expansion and the renovations are completed over the course of some years. We've also made a specific effort that whatever temporary measures that we do, the other guiding principle is to have them complementary to the permanent solution, so that if possible, if we need to modify some areas of the building, they will be useful not only for this temporary solution, but also the permanent solution. And so that we don't have situations where we're renovating an area one time and then following up and gutting it and re-renovating it at a later time. So we're trying to accommodate kind of both solutions together in one so that we don't have that situation. Those are the guiding principles generally. Once we have some information from OCA on how involved they're gonna be, their comfort level on some of the concepts that we've been kicking around, we'll certainly be back to committee and informing the committee as we proceed.
And the priority has shifted now because we've taken care of the permanent situation moving forward, and Clark Patterson is in the design phase. The priority has shifted to the temporary aspects, and we're just looking for clearance and understanding of the protocols that might be involved with OCA. And we think that Paul, the judge, and with Jeff's contact through John Norris and Mr. Rodman, that collectively will be on the same page after this week and be ready to execute a plan. I think we're all set, except for, we've covered number 1 in referrals. Number 2 we've covered. And we've covered, I believe, number 4 just now, and number 3.
Yes, on number 3 on referrals, I did speak briefly with Matt Smullen of Clark Patterson about the committee's desire to make sure that we incorporate some of those exterior entrance areas into the final design. So we're having those conversations. I think those will be added into the design, and we'll see what the impacts are as far as their current, casters and their current letters of authorization, but they understand, and I think we'll have to discuss it further too, as far as what areas that we wanna include, you know, on the other sections of the building that aren't necessarily having any major renovations done.
Okay, and a reminder, we have, we convene at 1 o'clock over at the airport for our airport business. And we do have the abilities to film and take minutes, et cetera. So, at 1 o'clock, we'll see everybody there, Jeff.
That we will have a brief, business meeting, to conduct a couple resolution requests. And then immediately following that, we already have, Town of Lake George has donated use of their trolley. So we have that on site already, and, so any supervisors that would like to do a tour will be going both inside the fence and, some of the areas around the airport. So it'll be a unique opportunity for supervisors to get out onto the airport, with, myself and Ross Dewberry to describe some of the areas where there's been activity, as well as some of the areas of future activity, and we'll even get a look at the Marl Fen.
Any other business from supervisors come before the committee? Hearing none, Travis?
Just wanted to ask, is the general public allowed to, go on that tour?
I think there's issues with liability of being in a county vehicle at that point. I don't know. I haven't really considered it. Normally, we don't, transport, you know, the public in a county vehicle with a county driver, unless it's a particular county service.
We'd have to check with, I mean, is there somebody from the public that wants to go?
Yeah.
I think too, but if you have a quorum of supervisors, it has to be considered a public meeting, even if it's in a moving vehicle.
I think, didn't we take you last time, Don?
I don't know, I don't remember that now.
You didn't go on that?
You would've, you probably would've brought me back and I wouldn't be here. I don't think I actually did go now.
We can double check with Martin, but let's assume they can.
And the committee, I mean, if we have room, does committee have any problem with Travis on?
Thank you.
Sounds good. We'll see you over there at 1. Any other business come before the committee? Hearing none, motion to adjourn. John, seconded by Evelyn. All in favor? Aye. So moved.